All right, folks, it's Friday, November the 3rd, and as you can tell, I'm over at the Hayti Heritage Center, which is a cultural arts center that I work at in Durham. And of course, there are a lot of things that are going on in the world as well. So I'll talk about some of those things, and then I'll bring our very special guest. We'll talk about something that we all have to face at some point or another in life, but he has a very positive message about it. And that is the whole notion of this there is life and there is death as well. So we'll be talking about some of those near death experiences and all along those lines. But before we get to that, let's get to some of the things that are happening in the world. So definitely we know that a lot of things are going on. The US has House has passed a Republican Israeli only aid bill. So that is for 14.5 billion and it is a military aid package for Israel. So that is something that is going on in the world and that folks are paying attention to. So definitely that is something that we are seeing in the news, and definitely Hezbollah's Nasrallah is to break his silence as the Lebanon border skirmishes intensify. So there may be some talk about that particular war even spreading to other parts of the region as well. So that is something that folks are paying attention to quite a bit and all along those lines. So definitely there's a lot of things that are happening in the world and a lot of things that are definitely impacting us on one way or the other. So that is something that is going on and that we will be having continuing discussions about here on World Edition and all in that kind of way. And speaking of things that are going on in the world, the U.S. is imposing sweeping sanctions targeting Russia over the Ukrainian war. So we are seeing that in the news as well. And the Russia's Wagner Group is planning to send air defenses to Hezbollah, according to what the United States is saying. And that was from a report in the Wall Street Journal. So that is something else that we are seeing. And we're also seeing that Pakistan has rounded up undocumented Afghan refugees as they are beginning to deport Afghans who fled the Taliban. So definitely that is something that we are seeing in the news as well. So definitely a lot of things are going on, and a lot of things are even going on in the weather because apparently Storm Syrian is killed 5 people as it brings record rainfall to Italy. And definitely that is seeing something we're seeing as well as that is definitely taking that particular European death toll to 12. And India's New Delhi is blanketed by toxic haze, and apparently that is closing some of the schools in that particular region and along those lines. So definitely that is something we are seeing, as well as a ban on prosecution of past Northern Ireland killings that is causing new divisions in that part of the world. And investigators are being sent to U.S. research base on Antarctica to look into sexual violence concerns. So we know that some of the concerns around sexual violence have been in the news as well. So definitely a lot of things are taking place in that sense. And along those lines, I'm going to bring up some of the things that are taking place in the United States also. And then we'll be bringing in a special guest. And of course, we've got other people that will be joining us, including we've got Sasha Starr from Ukraine, so he might be joining us as well. And of course, our founder, that being Nick Palpado, and all along those lines. But there is definitely some conversations around the tense testimony of Eric Trump and Donald Trump, Jr., that is, as there is the case that is going on in that area as well. That is a New York civil case that is taking place, and definitely folks are paying attention to that. And a former Memphis cop has agreed to a plea deal in the Tyree Nichols beating death. So that is something that a lot of folks were paying attention to. It was definitely a chant that was going on among Black Lives Matter and other folks as well. So definitely in this case, it looks like there might have been some interesting results, and we'll see what else plays out in that way. And an anti-Trump group has produced 4 ads attacking his legal troubles. And apparently those ads might have backfired. So we're going to see what goes on in that way and along those lines. And the U.S. is investigating whether Adams received illegal donations from Turkey. That's the mayor there in New York City. So they might be looking into seeing whether he got some illegal donations from the area of Turkey and all in that way. And in DC area, they're saying that moderating temperature trend is toward warmth, and that's going to be starting today. So there's been some cold weather here in North Carolina, some cold weather in DC, some cold weather in other parts of the world as well. And definitely it'll be interesting to see what's going on and whether we have a Indian summer of some sort or another, or whether we get back into these cold tracks. And I'll find out what's going on where my guest is, because he's over there in Amsterdam, and I know it can get quite cold in that area and all along those lines. Just a couple of other quick national news, and I'll bring in the special guest. But Trump has asked the appeal court to stay the gag order in DC 2020 election interference case. So that is something else that we are seeing. And apparently, Biden is quietly tapping Obama to help shape his AI strategy. So definitely, I know that he was looking at AI and trying to come up, because apparently, according to Wall Street Journal and the articles that I've seen in that area, AI is a national security danger. So there are some people that are concerned about the nature of AI as well. And don't forget that apparently sleep experts prefer standard over daylight savings time, but daylight savings time is about to take place. And there are some folks that even want to end daylight savings time. I know that even in my own case, sometimes that biological clock has to take a minute to adjust when we make the change from one time to another. But daylight saving times will be ending on early Sunday morning. So don't forget to, adjust your clock accordingly and all along those lines. But like I said earlier, there are things that you cannot avoid no matter what. There is definitely life and there is definitely death. So I'm going to bring in my very special guest and all in that space. So glad to have with me Robert Kopis, who is coming at us all the way from Amsterdam and all along those kind of ways. So he's over there in that part of Europe. And you have written a very fascinating book about, that you just heard. There's a lot of non-love going on in the world, but you've written a very fascinating book that is spiritually based and is looking at some of the near-death experiences, but also looking at how, in your mind and what you're hearing from some of those that have experienced these, love is the key. And I've heard that love is the key from many of folks, including some of our songs, because I'm a big fan of songs and all along those lines. Some people may think that it's a little Shangri-La, but I used to be a big fan and still am a big fan of the song Imagine, and that Imagine in a certain kind of world that John Lennon put out and all along those lines. But not everybody finds that song to be a great song, because some people also think that it might be leaning more toward socialism or communism or other things that might be considered to be a little unrealistic and all along those lines. But definitely, Robert, if you could share a little bit about your own experiences. I've had friends that have had experiences. Actually, the building that I'm in is known to have some ghosts and things along those lines, because it is an old church, an old converted church, and all in that space. But if you can share a little bit about your own experiences with near death and this book of yours as well.
Okay, thank you for having me on your show. That first, Mark. It's a very interesting topic. That's why I have studied that for decades. I've written this book, and I think it's a very, very good book, not because I wrote it, but because actually there are hundreds of quotes in it from NDEers, near-death experiencers, and actually they wrote the book. And as you said, light and love are the main part of near-death experiences, especially love is seen as very, very important. It is consistently coming back in many of these NDEs, and I always, to an audience that I talk to, I always try to make them think, what is unconditional actually? Unconditional really means without any condition. So it doesn't matter how you dress, how you live, what kind of religion you adhere to. You can be Muslim or Christian. Near-death experiences happen to everyone, rich, poor, even people that consider themselves very, very bad. There are cases, I can elaborate on that, like Daniel Brinkley. That's a guy who he said he was a horrible guy because he was teasing children, bullying children in school, stealing their bikes, was in many fights, and then he went. He joined an American agency that went abroad to other countries and shot people that were, so to speak, against the U.S. government. And one time he killed he blew up a hotel with more than 50 people in it, and just to take out one. And then when he was having his near-death experience, he saw everything he did in his life review, because a life review is something that is seen regularly in near-death experiences. And he saw everything from the part of the others. So it's not only you see it from your own side, as if you are the giver, but you're also the receiver of whatever you do. And if it's nice, you will be very happy to see what you have done and feel what you've done as if you are those others. But if it's something like what he did, that really hurt him so much to go over his life review. But nevertheless, there was no judgment for him. It was still unconditional love for him. That's what I tried to say just now. The unconditional love is one of the two main pillars, I think, of near-death experiences.
And along the same lines, Mr. Kappas and everything, I have oftentimes brought up on this show and other shows a show that I saw many years ago, and it was from a famous TV anchor. I can't remember whether it was Peter Jennings or Ted Koppel, but they were actually looking at the world religions, and like you said, and mentioning the different ones, whether it was Islam, whether it was Christianity, or whether it was a number of the others. And they found in this particular TV special that I was actually watching with family members of mine sometime back, I think it was my dad and my younger brother, that there was a lot of similarities in terms of messaging, that the message of what you just mentioned, of love and of respect, and a lot of
Absolutely.
the other common cores, even respect for family, respect for nature, and others are the common thread that we see through the world religions. Now, there are extremists, and there are some people that would point to the extremists in the Islamic faith, but I would argue that there have been extremists even in the Christian faith, and even in some of the faiths that are considered peaceful, like Hindu and other things as well. But they have had some folks that have had some issues as well in terms of extreme side. So in your experience and in talking to folks that have had the near-death experience, because there's this notion by some religious groups that it's their way or the highway. I'll just use that term and everything. But I personally think that it might be different than that, and we might see some people up in heaven that we don't expect to see up in heaven. But what has been your experiences in that space?
Well, the case is actually that you have extremists in everywhere. I mean, in any religion, also in Christianity. Don't make a mistake there. Maybe more in the history, but apart from now. But in any case, the main thing you see throughout all the religions is this thing that I mentioned, the unconditional love that's been seen. And it doesn't matter what religion you adhere to. And there is a cultural aspect to near-death experiences. If you research near-death experiences like I do, and you see or hear a lot of those, there is a sort of a cultural aspect there. Like Jesus is regularly seen in near-death experiences, but he would normally occur only in near-death experiences of people that have a Christian background. And in other religions, you will find other deities like Krishna in the Hindu area. You would see him in near-death experiences of Hindus. And with Islam, with Muslim people, you would see Muhammad, although he's not a deity, but he's a very important prophet. So it is culturally colored, so to speak, or because it can be true that and Jesus and Muhammad and Krishna and others are there, but it's also how people interpret what they see, because the point is that this other area that people go to is so different from what we have here. It is so more complete, so more dimensional. People even say that they cannot really, they find no words to express what they feel and see there. So what do is you color it to what you have in your pocket, in what you know already, and that's how it comes. I think that there's some kind of cultural aspect to near-death experiences, but the main thing is the unconditional love, and also the other pillar, I would say, that's my view, is the feeling of unity, of that we are all one. And that is said regularly. To give you an example, there was this a woman who had her near-death experience and knew she had to go back to Earth, to her body. And sometimes people don't want to, but she wanted to. And she knew she would lose all the knowledge she acquired over there, and everything she saw, all the truths, all the wisdom, all the facts. She knew she would lose all that, but she thought, I'm going to remember one line that says it all, that says all what is on the other side. And that line was, all is everything and everything is one. All is everything and everything is one. And she said, when I was over there, I thought it was so simple. Everything is actually so simple, how it all works, why we are on Earth, why there is an Earth, why there is this other area. And she said, I can't understand why we don't see it when we are in the body, when we are just living our lives on Earth, but we fail to see all that. And then she thought, I'm going to remember the main thing, and that's we are all one. That's what she came back with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I can definitely see that kind of philosophy and everything. Now, you also bring up something in your book that I know not everybody will agree with, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around this. But what you kind of alluded to it earlier when you talked about some of the things that people have done that were horrible, like the gentleman that had bombed a area and everything. And one of the things I know that is a topic that you talk about within the book is what I do to you, I do to myself. And I do know that sometimes we wonder about this notion of karma and karma coming back to bite you and all along those lines. And you also mentioned this notion of everyone being important. And I know that even in some of those news stories I mentioned, that there are certain folks that are seen both currently and historically as being quote unquote beyond redemption and all along those lines. So is that a miscorrect? Is that a incorrect attitude that people have? Because a lot of people would think that Putin, and we want to go back to Hitler and a number of other people, that they were beyond redemption. But I was just wondering, because I did see this notion of yours that everyone is important, and there might be some people that would argue against that because of some of their own biases and their own hatreds and everything. But I'd love to hear your thoughts around that.
Yeah, that's a very good point you make there. It's like we can all find a list of people that are really horrible, at least to our view, in our view. And I always tell people, think of someone you really despise or you really hate, because that happens. It could be a politician, it could be someone around the corner, but the unconditional love is also there for that person or those persons. There's no exception. And I tell you this because it's not that I know that, but it's because I hear that consistently from so many NDEers. That's one of the consistent things. So coming back to the very nasty persons that you that you alluded to, like Putin and even Hitler, and well, we can always make a longer list. I can only tell you what NDEers tell me, and what I get from NDEs is that there is no exception to the unconditional love. So I think it would also apply to them. And what you said, we are all important, every one of us. That's also something that's mentioned by a lot of NDEers. We wouldn't be here if we were not important. We all have a place here. We all have something to do. Everyone has a task. And that doesn't only apply to you as a host on the radio, or me as a writer, or for our king or your president. It applies to everyone, to the housewives, to the people in offices, to also to the beggars in the street that have no home and maybe do drugs or whatever. They all have their place. But I fail to understand why that is, that they are important. But this is being said. Everyone has their place. And if you really consider the oneness that there is out there, then I try to think about that, and then I come up with the next view. So suppose a child is born. Something needs to go in the child, like the spirit or so. Where does it come from? The only thing that can fill it up is God, or the big spirit, or the source. I don't know what people want to call this. God is often colored by religion, so I prefer to say the Supreme One. But that one fills up the child. But that filled up you and me. So actually, we are both coming from the same source. We are the same material, not in physical sense, but there is something within us, the divinity that is both in you and me and in anyone that's listening. And it also has been in Putin, or it still is because he's not dead yet, but also Hitler, or you name anyone. It is there. The problem here on earth is that we need to express our divinity. And that's difficult because we are in 3 dimensions and we have time. We have to roam around, get our food. We have to, if we want to be somewhere, we need to travel. I can't be with you instantaneously at this moment because I have to take a plane to go over to your country. So there are all these hindrances, all these limitations here. And on the other side, you don't have any limitations.
Yeah, speaking of those limitations and everything, one of the things that I've heard people talking about on Pod TV and definitely on other networks as well is this notion of understanding your purpose. And there are a number of folks that will say that a number of us don't have an idea of our purpose or our vision and all along those lines. So how important do you think it is for people to have a understanding of their destiny, their reason for being here, and all along those lines? And what have the NDEs told you about that? Because I do know that there's been this whole trope kind of out there about people that are literally walking around almost as if they are zombies and don't have a purpose and everything. So what is your notion of understanding your purpose? Is this important in our life? And is this something that the NDEs have been telling you about?
Well, there have been experiencers who heard what their task was. But once they go back again, they know it was said to them, it was told to them, but they forgot it because it's not, you should do your life without knowing what your task is, I think, because otherwise you would quickly do your task and then hope to go back. Because most people that have had an NDE want to go back again because they lose their fear of death. That's one of the other main things that come out of near-death experience. They lose their fear of death because they know it doesn't end with death. It goes on. But maybe for your listeners, it's interesting to know that we're talking about this subject as if it's something you cannot prove. But there has been good research showing some circumstantial evidence that NDEs are real. These are veridical observations, and that's a technical term that actually says that it's verifiable out-of-body experiences. Now you have to understand that when someone has an NDE, they leave their body. That's the first phase. Sometimes that goes so quick that they don't see anything. They go into this other area immediately. But sometimes people can roam around in the hospital where they had their heart attack, or where they had it, or where they had an accident, and they see things that they can later tell that they saw those things, and that could be confirmed independently. And the important thing is that these things that these people have seen cannot be seen from their body perspective. To give you a quick example, there was this woman who was brought into a hospital unconscious, and during her NDE, she saw that there was a shoe in the ledge of the hospital. And when she came through and everything was back to normal again for her, she told the story to a nurse, and the nurse was so curious. She went looking out on all the ledges of the hospital, and she actually found the shoe with the same characteristics as that was told by the NDE, like a wear spot on the toe and the color and the things like that. Now there are hundreds of these kind of stories, more complicated stories, but they have been confirmed by others independently. So that means that the consciousness can exist outside the body, independently of the body, and that's the only thing that you can prove with this. It's circumstantial evidence, but that means that if you believe this part of the NDE, then the other part that is in this otherworldly environment may also be very true.
Can you tell me to come here and cover for him?
Yes, sir. I heard that you'd be covered.
Sorry, I didn't get this.
Let me ask him a quick question.
Well, I was talking about the veridical observations. Maybe it's good for me to tell another experience.
Yes, I was wondering about your own experience. If you can share your own experiences I'm thinking you might have had an NDE yourself and everything, so you can share your own experiences and what got you.
I didn't have my experience myself. I was very, very much interested in NDEs, and that that led to this study. I was studying this subject for decades already, since the millennium change. But the veridical observations are really important because it gives circumstantial evidence that NDEs are a first phase, or something that you can really exit your body and be independent. Your consciousness can exit your body and be independent from it.
Yeah, along those lines and everything, I was going to bring in some of our other guests, including one of the founders of the network, and Sasha Starr, and of course Jacoby as well. But it sounds to me like one of the things you're saying is that those people that have experienced the NDEs have a better understanding of life and death, because I do know a number of people are fearful of what the end looks like, and as we get older, there's the definite possibility, well, not the possibility, but the reality that we will all have our end date. As a friend of mine says, we all know our birth date, none of us know our expiration date, and all along those lines. But it seems to me that those that have experienced the NDEs have a better understanding of that, because I have a dear friend of mine, he's actually the one that coined that phrase in my space and everything. I'm sure other people have used it as well, but he is a stroke survivor. I think a multiple stroke survivor, if I'm remembering correctly. But my friend Ray Pascal definitely has, I think, a different attitude about life than he had before those strokes and all along those lines, even though he still has very much the same kind of personality that I remember. But I'm sure that his thoughts around life and death are probably different than they were before going through that experience. So I was just wondering, do the NDEs have a better understanding of life and death?
Let me tell you on beforehand that near-death experiences don't turn into saints or so. They still have their own issues. They still are human. They make their mistakes. But yes, their life changes thoroughly because they have seen how things are. In their perspective, it's that what you do to others, you actually really do to yourself or to universe, to this oneness, and that comprises you as well. So you do it actually to yourself. And that makes them become more cautious in their actions towards others, and to nature and to animals. So their life changes very much. Sometimes they change so radically that the partner, so the wife or husband, doesn't recognize the person anymore. And then sometimes they separate because they can't keep up with each other. But there's a big change from an NDE in most cases, yes.
Yeah, Sasha has a question.
Sasha has a question.
Hello, Robert. I have a question. Imagine that you have a friend in Israel and he would lose his wife, who was raped and then killed, and his 4 children, who were all killed mercilessly and their heads were cut off. What would you advise your friend about unconditional love and other virtues, what you're talking about?
It's always, and not only for Israeli people, but it's always horrible, these things that happen on earth. They also happen in the United States. They happen in the Ukraine. They happened in Cambodia, in Rwanda. Atrocities occur everywhere. Now, what I hear from NDEers is that love is the most important thing there is, that it's in everyone, that there is divinity actually in everyone. So also in the people that commit atrocities like you just described, it's maybe hard to understand when you're a victim, but I can only tell you what NDEers tell me, and that's that everyone has that light within him or her. And you know, in this case, with any struggle or strive, the best thing to go forward is not the hate part, because that makes people sour in itself. Love is the only way. That's what I understand from NDEers. They consider love the most important thing, and it's the only thing that will prevail in the end.
So that's what you would tell your friend in Israel. And what do you expect your friend in Israel would tell you after you would lecture him about unconditional love? What do you think?
I don't want to lecture anyone, especially not in Israel at this moment, who lost.
So maybe all your concept about unconditional love is all wrong, and you're trying to picture something what just doesn't exist. If you will go to Huntington's, the book, the War of Civilizations, you understand that the different civilizations, they can exist only so far, because it's not religion thing. Actually, religion, it doesn't matter much. But one thing is important. With religion, they're coming different cultural and other patterns that form certain civilizations and societies, and they're very different in nature. So civilizations which has one set of values, and here is another civilization with a completely different set of values. They are unreconcilable. They cannot exist together for a long period of time. For some period of time, yes, but eventually one civilization will have to defeat the other one. So their view on the world order and the other values will prevail, and their people will be able to continue to exist in their formation without being influenced by other civilization. You can see now what's happened in Europe, which accepted millions of all kind of people from different civilizations. Was it a good experience? Absolutely not. Because they, instead of being adopted into civilizations that they came to, They are trying to keep their set of values and actually influence the European set of values to their advantage. It doesn't work. Tell them about unconditional love. I would like to hear their response to you.
Like I said, there is definitely different places that have different views. Even here in the United States, we consider ourselves the melting pot and all along those lines. But I think Jacoby had a question and everything, or a thought. So Jacoby, it's on you.
Speaking on the unconditional love, which I think we had talked about the religious aspect as well, because the unconditional love, the turn the other cheek, which is in the Bible, which Christ talks about, which is the historical context, or the basis of the religion of Judaism and those individuals in Israel, Sasha. So therefore, being able to talk to them about that in a religious context isn't really that far off. But to get back to the point, to get back to the discussion, in terms of talking about the NDEers, I think, as you called them, right. In your discussions with them, and in that near-death experience, I mean, what have they told you? What they've seen in terms of visually? Because that out-of-body experience we always hear about. There are movies based on it. There are just so many discussions based on it. I'm curious, from your perspective, what you've heard from those NDEers as to what they've seen while they were experiencing that near-death experience.
Okay, what NDEers see, let me first explain that not one NDE is the same as another. They are all unique in what they see, in how they perceive things, in how it works, and how it goes, how it plays out for them. So every NDE is different. Yet, if you look at all of them, and that's what I had in my book, I had all these quotes, and that's why I can, if you read my book, you get an impression of what an NDE is. And that's also the title for the book, Impressions of NDEs, Near-Death Experiences. Now, what do I hear? Anything. What they see sometimes is the light. They have a conversation with the light. Sometimes they feel that it's God. Sometimes they feel that it's Krishna. Sometimes they see cities of light. They see a wonderful environment. And it's also something that people can have some kind of control over. To give you an example, a woman that I know, an American woman, she had her NDE after an accident with a car. She was hovering in this totally pitch black area. There's nothing there, nothing. But there was a wonderful, loving feeling, and there was the unconditional love that I spoke about before. And then she hovered there for quite a while, and then suddenly she thought, okay, this is very nice to do, but I'd like to see something. I'd like to see something else than only the pitch black area. And then it was, she said, as if a hand with paintbrushes came along and painted rolling hills, wonderful flowers, beautiful trees, nice waterfalls and creeks and stuff like that. Something she would really feel comfortable with. Now, some other people paint or say something like the same lines, that they saw a wonderful area, like a paradise kind of garden. But some people see cities, some people don't see anything and have conversation with deceased loved ones. So it can be anything. If you really go through a lot of these NDEs, you see that there are all differences. But the central theme is unconditional love. And I can tell to Sasha, I understand what you say and where you come from with respect to the strife between nations and societies. That's true. That's how it works. That's also in your country. The Indians were moved, so to speak, because there was an influx of others that were more powerful. That's all true, but both in the Indians and in the Europeans that were the founders of the United States that came into the country, there was this oneness. If you want to say it like that, God was in those people, in anyone on both sides. And that also applies to the conflict in the Middle East with the Palestinians and the Israeli. God is in both people, in each of the persons there. That's how I understand it. It's not that that God chooses sides. God doesn't choose sides. It's in favor of everyone. It loves everyone unconditional. That's how I understand it.
My question is, where was the God on October 7th, 2023?
Everywhere. God was everywhere. It was in you, in the perpetrators, in the victims, everywhere. God is everywhere because God is everything. Everything is
Hold
one.
on a second,
I would
Sasha.
like to conclude that he's quite useless, really. If he would allow what's happened on October 7th, 2023 happen, he is the useless. Just forget about it.
No, hold on a second, Sasha. Along those same lines, because that's an argument that I've heard
Then
from.
I wouldn't rely on his whether presence
Well,
or
but
absence. It
okay,
doesn't.
hold on a second, Sasha, because that's an argument I've heard from people for decades and centuries and everything. And I'd love to hear Mr. Robert's thoughts around this, Mr. Koppas, because this is a notion that folks have had even with slavery. Is this notion that how can God allow horrible things to happen to good people and all along those lines? That's been an argument. Now, some people will make the argument that don't worry about it on this side of the earth because it'll be better on the other side of the earth. That's kind of the notion of what people told the slaves and all along those lines. But that was a form of control in my mind and everything, because definitely the religion can be used as a form of control. But Mr.
May I
Koppas,
have
what do you,
answer to my question first, Mark?
It's the same question.
it's
No,
the same question.
absolutely not. The slaves were enslaved in Africa by Portuguese traders. And even before Portuguese traders took over, the African slave traders enslaved a lot of slaves, then sold them to Portuguese traders who brought them over the ocean.
Sasha, we all know
So
the
this
history.
is-
We know the history of slavery.
Some
But
people
the
may
thing
not be
is, the
knowledgeable, but
question
use the
is
Torah.
the
So
same.
I'm trying to get people
Sasha.
on the speed. So here is exactly what's happened for slavery for generations. We are talking about one day, October 7th,
Sasha.
2023.
The question is the same. It doesn't matter whether it's 9/11. It doesn't matter whether it's slavery. It doesn't matter whatever it is. The
Okay,
question
I
is
just
the question
okay,
that
you
you
don't
asked.
want to answer? That's okay.
No, the question that you asked and the question that I'm asking him as well
Same
is.
question.
what
No,
is the-
don't ask your question when I'm asking my question.
Sasha.
Let's hear answer to my question, and
Sasha.
then you'll ask your question. Don't
Sasha.
try to go over me with your problems. No,
Sasha.
let me hear answer to my question first.
Sasha, just to quickly interject. You're asking the same question. He's
No, I
asking
don't.
why-
No,
wait,
listen,
Sasha,
don't
Sasha,
put your words
Sasha,
in my
Sasha,
mouth.
calm.
I'm asking very
Sasha,
specific
calm.
question. Okay,
You're
just
asking
keep
why
it
good
quiet.
people were
Thank
hurt. Where was God when good people were hurt on this particular date? That's what you're asking.
No,
It is the
not
same
that.
question.
No, you don't understand even my question, Jatovi. You
Then
don't understand my question. I'm
explain
trying
your question.
to my
Explain
question
your
is this. So there is a divine God, divinity of some sort. So he is supposed to be, if he is present, maybe there is no such thing, but let's assume that there is. So he should be present with Hamas attackers. He is with them. He is also with Israelis being absolutely mercilessly killed, mutilated, or so on. So how the God, our dear God, could be at the same time on both sides? I would like to understand that.
Can I answer that question,
Please.
please?
Please.
You know, what I understand from near-death experiences is that this earth is created with free will. So it means that when we are born, wherever it is, we have free will. So we can choose whatever we want to do. And sometimes things go in a nice direction, and sometimes they go totally sour. I mean, you know the whole story with Holocaust, how it came about, and with the Nazis and everything. I mean, that there is a history why it existed, and that's because of all the free will, the choices that people made. And nevertheless, so you have to see it perhaps like God is in everyone, but we are. It is dark in our minds because we are in 3 dimensions and time, so we are limited. That's why we don't see the best thing, the best way forward. And interestingly, in near-death experiences, when there is a life review, people can see what they have done to others as if they are those others. And that doesn't mean to be that it's like a punishment, because there is no punishment. But these people that did all these horrible things on the 7th of October will be confronted with their deeds, and they will feel what it is to be the receiver of those deeds. So that is the main thing, is that we all have free will, and we can choose. And that's what I wanted to say. In life reviews, people see what they have done to others, but they see also that they have options, that they could have chosen something else with an other outcome. And what I understand from one of the examples that I have is that it's so painful to see that you chose something that didn't bring love into the world. And that is
Robert, along those same lines and everything, I definitely think that Toby had a question as well. But you have a very radical idea in your book, and some people might not think it is as radical as I think it is. But as I mentioned earlier, there are a number of religions that will exercise this notion of my way or the highway. But if I'm reading you correctly, one of the topics that your book brings up is that heaven is for all people, meaning that you can not necessarily be one race, one religion, but that it is for all folks that existed in earth and everything. So could you explain that? Because I think that is a radical viewpoint in the sense of what a number of religions teach, because there are a number of religions that will tell you that it is their way or the highway.
Yeah, in Christianity, for instance, if you go back hundreds of years, they would say that if you are adhering to another religion, you are doomed to go to hell. Right. No, that's not how it works. I mean, a religion, or religions are made by people. So if people in a religion say that you are not one of us, so you go to hell, and you are one of us and you can go to heaven, that's what they say. That's not how it works. The thing is that everyone eventually goes to the same place. Everyone, no exceptions. That's what I understand. I know that there are sometimes being said that there are distressing NDEs, so you could think that there is a kind of a hell, but then I tell you that from research, it is known that it is not the case that bad people have a distressing NDE and good people have a blissful NDE, because one of the things that is difficult is to define what is good and bad. It's also something that we decide here on earth. But on the other side, when we die, there is a different view. Everything changes. Things are totally different from what we have here. And the main thing is that there's unconditional love for everyone. And I'm really sorry to say that perhaps, well, actually, I'm not sorry to say, it applies to the perpetrator and to the victim, both, because there's divinity in both of them, and there's free will. These people that commit atrocities, no matter where, they have a free will. They can choose to do it or not to do it.
Yeah. Hey, Robert,
God doesn't interfere. God doesn't interfere, because I don't think that God has a possibility to interfere here in this world.
Just really quickly and everything, what got you into this? Because like I said, you were coming to us from Amsterdam and everything. So what about it? Because I do know you have this PhD and everything. What interested you in this particular space of study and everything? So what got you into this particular interest? Was it something you always had in life, or when did you become interested in? And has Amsterdam always been your home? Because I know it's evening time there now and everything, but just tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Yeah, so I was born in Venezuela and I lived in Iran. So that's was Persia then, and now I live in the Netherlands for more than 50 years. What got me started with this was that I read the book by Raymond Moody, and that's the guy who coined the phrase near-death experiences. And he had an example in his book with a life review. Now, you must know that I was raised Catholic, Roman Catholic, with hell and purgatory. And only when you're very nice, you go to heaven immediately. And I'd always thought that's a funny story. I don't like it. I don't think it's right. But what do you do if you're a child? You believe whatever your parents tell you. So I believed it. And then I read this book when I was studying. I was in my 20s. And I read this book and this life review. There was a woman who had her life review, and she said things like, I did things that were not very nice, but no one judged me. I saw what I did. I saw it from the perspective of the others, but no one judged me. There still was unconditional love for me. And that when I read that, I thought, this is correct. And that's logical. Because you can, if someone judges you, it's you yourself. You can judge yourself when you are infused with the unconditional love that there's out there. Then you can separate out what you did nicely and what you did, less lovingly to others. Because on earth here, we don't have that impartiality. We can do horrible things and still think I did something right. That also applies to the conflict in the Middle East. Both sides, they do things that are not very nice, and they still, on both sides, they think they are in their right for whatever reason. But if you really go down to the unconditional part, neither party does nice things to the other.
How important in your mind is it to be connected to Mother Nature and everything? I'm hoping that Nick will join back, but I do see that in your backdrop is a picture of, I think, a dog and even a pig and everything. So I was wondering, how important is it in your life to be connected to other aspects of humanity, and maybe not so much humanity, but Mother Nature? Because I do know that if you came from Venezuela, you might have some ties to some of the native culture as well. But how important is it to be associated to Mother Nature in your mind?
For myself, I think I started loving nature more and more the older I get. Maybe that's because you get older, you get wiser. But I know from near-death experiences, after they have their near-death experience, they totally change. They become more lean, they lean more towards nature. They love nature more. They love more to be with other people. They see the social side of other people. There is sometimes they become more spiritual, or most of the time they become less religious, more spiritual, and sometimes they have very strange after effects, like having they can alter electricity. So when people wear watches, they most of the time they stop. So they interfere with electricity somehow. We can't explain that, but that's something that we see. But the love for others, for nature, for animals, less interested in power and money, those are the things that typically occur to near-death experiences.
Wow.
Now, yeah, I hope that, actually, I hope that Putin and people that are in power all would have had a near-death experience at one point in time. They will change. They will really do things differently.
Jacoby, you had a question. I know we were going to wind it down, and later on we'll talk about that very serious topic of Ukraine, Russia, and China on Sasha's program coming at 11 o'clock and all along those lines. But Jacoby, I think as we're winding down, we've got about another 5 minutes. You had your hand raised, so you had a question.
I guess since we've hit some of the heavier topics, and I guess I'll try and route it out towards more of an entertaining, interesting end, because yeah, I think we all can agree that humanity finding that peace, that power, that value in humanity is very important, and this is one of those ways that you're talking about, trying to see God in everyone and see that unconditional love in everyone. One of the things I guess we were talking about earlier in the conversation, and I guess would be a basis for many of the movies that are out there, from talking about the multiverse to talking about how there's a show on Amazon Prime called Upload, where they take the consciousness of somebody and place them somewhere else.
Yeah.
And people thinking about like Ponce de Leon and the eternal life. How does eternal life fit into the idea of the afterlife? Because Golden Compass was another one that talked about seeing different area or different planes in the multiverse as well. But yeah, the eternal life idea in the whole afterlife portion. How does that fit in?
That's interesting that you touch upon that. Eternal. The word is very difficult, but NDEers come back with this notion that time, there's something strange going on with time on the other side. They say things like, my experience was not in time, it was between time. Or they say, all time is there at the same time. All time is at the same time. You have to think that. It's difficult for them to express what they have experienced there. One example of a person who was very, very interested in Michelangelo was taken to the time of Michelangelo and saw Michelangelo still working on the Sistine Chapel ceiling. And in a fleeting moment, he became Michelangelo. And he said that was staggering beyond words. And he had to go back again. But he told that story again when he was here. So that means that time, there's something strange going on with time. So eternity is when there is an absence of time. I would define it like that. When we go leave our body, when we are in that other area where there's no time, we are, I think, in that eternity.
On an interesting note, and it looks like we're coming close to that time, speaking of everything that you're talking about in terms of the life reviews, the unconditional love, and so on and so forth, again, relating it back to TV, movies, and all the other things, an interesting thing, and Mark, I think you'd enjoy this show as well, especially based off of the conversation that we're having here. There is a Japanese animated show called Death Parade. Death Parade it speaks everything that you're talking about in terms of life reviews, in terms of arbiters, and a heaven with no hell. But that heaven is different. That heaven means you get to come back and maybe try in a new life. The hell is an empty void that you just disappear forever. You're just stuck in this empty void. So it's interesting to think about the, I guess, other cultures and other ideas based around the similar notion of not only a heaven and hell and not even being a hell, but also an arbiter being there and thinking about how you're reviewing or looking back at your life and how that works. So that'd be a neat suggestion, both of you, to check out that anime, Death Parade. It's pretty cool.
Sounds interesting. Thank you.
Don't
Thank
binge
you. Definitely
watch
check it.
Gotta decompress it because it is very heavy.
Okay.
Definitely check it out. Sounds like it'll be interesting. Mr. Kopis, if you have any last thoughts and everything, I know this has been a very interesting conversation. I know folks have been very interested in thinking about what life will be like in the end, and even to what Toby was talking about, some people are concerned about that eternal life and whether that is a life that you get to come back, because that's another thing that we didn't touch on, but I do know, and I don't know whether the NDEs have talked about that, which is this notion of there being multiple trips, because there are some people that will believe in reincarnations, and that sometimes you are going on different steps and different trips around this same earth and everything, but at different times, because I've heard that conversation as well. But I was just wondering, is that something that your NDEs are telling you, that they have been here before, meaning that they have been here in another lifetime as well? Because that is something that I do know comes up in conversation, is people that believe that they were maybe not going back as you described with Michelangelo, but actually have lived multiple lives.
Yeah. So you're talking actually about reincarnation. The number of people that had an NDE and thought that reincarnation is true is the same percentage as in the general population. So it doesn't say anything. And if you ask me, I think if you look at oneness, we are all one. Then when you go back again, you go back to this oneness. If a child is born, it comes from that oneness. It doesn't necessarily have to be from you, because the idea that reincarnation gives is that it's sequential. And as I told you, time doesn't exist on the other side. So all lives are there at the same time. If you want to see it like that, Nefertiti or Cleopatra or Napoleon are living their lives as we speak at this moment. It's difficult to wrap your head around this, but that's the consequence of that. All time is there at the same time. So reincarnation, yes, God or the source reincarnates, but not necessarily me. I don't go as if I'm like this. I go to another life, a new life. It's God that reincarnates.
Hold on a second. I've got to ask you something, because if I'm hearing you correctly, and we've been friends for a number of years, I consider him to be a very close friend, and all along those lines, and we've definitely done some work in different lanes, everything from the Blues Festival to this lovely pod TV and everything. Do you mean that I'm stuck with Jacoby for the eternity and all along those lines? Because that's what it sounds like you're saying, is that because me and Jacoby are friends, that in this in the heaven version, I'll be seeing Jacoby even in that version as well, if I'm hearing you correctly and everything.
I don't think I understood it well, what you said. It's
Go ahead and rephrase it.
Well, I was just going to say, on an interesting scientific note about the same thing about reincarnation, and because wrapping your head around everything being at one time happening, like right now, and always happening eternally, that is one of the bases for talking about the multiverse and everything happening, and different images of yourself across different. And some people have the idea that when you dream, you're actually walking in a version of yourself in a different multiverse. But a interesting thing science-wise, like if you were to get to the event horizon of a black hole, and I heard this, is that because of the spin or the gravitational pull and the spin around it, if you were able to actually survive it and stand there, because of the speed of light going around, you would be able to see the back of your head.
Yeah.
Well,
and the way that there's a theory out there in terms of the way the universe is that it's kind of like a torus. There's that one, but then there's one where it basically loops all the way around, and at some point they merge and come out again. So then you're basically in a roundabout. I mean, we won't be around to see it if it ever were to loop all the way around, based on trying to figure out how the universe is itself, because supposedly, there is a viewable area of the universe and we can't see it all. And then there's the theories of, that we're moving and we don't see as much as we could millions of years ago, and we see more than we could. A bunch of crazy theories, but how it loops back around, and at some point, you come in and leave out at the same time.
Well, I think that science is developing in the direction that it finds that the world is not as objective as it was thought to be for ages. There is a lot of going on, and it also quantum mechanics and trying to reconcile that with relativity theory. They have to go into directions that make the scientists' minds go wild because it's so strange the conclusions they come to. So we are not there yet, but I think science will, if it progresses, it will go in a direction that will probably say things like NDEers say, like time is there all at the same time, or time doesn't necessarily need to be linear, or things like that. There's something else going on with time.
Hey,
It-
Mr. Copper says before we
Like,
wind down, we got
Mark.
maybe a few more minutes that we can go over. But one quick question I was going to ask you is, and it kind of comes back to something that Jacoby and other friends of mine talk about and everything, is do the NDEers have a belief or a thought that we are alone here on humanity? Or is there a belief among the NDEers that there is life in other parts of the universe, to come back to Jacoby's conversation around the universe?
What I heard from some NDEers is that they have seen other solar systems and that there is life elsewhere in the universe. But really, if you look at how big the universe is, if you really look at that, it's incredible. There are so many stars. It's incredible how big it is. And why would we be the only ones? I don't think that's correct. But yeah, to answer your question, yes, there have been NDEers that have seen life forms elsewhere in the universe.
Jacoby had
There's not many of those. I mean, the consistent message is that we are important. We don't die. I mean, we die, but we continue with our consciousness. And love is very important, and we are one. There's oneness in some or other way, but that we are one.
Wow. And everything. I didn't know if Jacoby had another quick question. Otherwise, I was going to ask you if you can tell how your book can be bought, and all along those lines, and any other messages that you would like to share as we get ready to wind down. But this has been a very interesting conversation, and I'm sure that others that are listening on Pod TV, because we air these things several times during the course of the week, will find it interesting as well. But get ready to head on out, but definitely tell folks how you can be reached and about how your folks can obtain your book and any other ways that you can be heard, because I think you have a YouTube channel as well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so everyone can buy my book at Amazon and then look for the title, Impressions of Near-Death Experiences. And my name is Robert Christopher Coppes, Coppes. They can also see my website, which is Bob Coppes, Coppes.com. And on YouTube, there are small videos to explain in 10 minutes some of the topics that I touch upon in the book. And you can see that on Heaven is for All. So hashtag Heaven is for All, or under my initials, RC Coppes. That's it.
Well, I greatly appreciate you being on. I think that a lot of people got some insight, and I hope you didn't mind the questions from both myself as well as Sasha, who can ask some interesting questions.
It was interesting. Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show. Thank you for the invitation.
No problem. Hopefully we'll have you back on in the near future as well. Love having repeat guests as well. But this has been a fun conversation. Me and Jacoby are getting ready to get on out of here. I know they're doing the Ukraine, Russia, China show, which is definitely exploring a more harsher topic, even as we're talking and all along those lines. But we're here to get on out of here. And I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and got some insight into folks that have had NDEs and all in that kind of way. I think the first time I heard about it was when a friend of mine had a out-of-body experience, and I need to find out if they've had any more of those. But it's a good friend of mine that's in the theater world that told me about that. That was probably about 20 years ago that he told me about that out-of-body experience. So folks apparently are having them regularly. I haven't had one. Maybe Jacoby's had one. And it doesn't know that Bob has had one yet either. But I do have friends that have told me that they have had some of these experiences. And now we've got some insight into some other NDE type of experiences as well. So we're going to get on out of here. And we'll be back on the 6th. I think think we've got 2 guests on that particular day, but I'll be sending Toby information about that. And I think that they are more in the political lanes, if I am remembering correctly. But we're going to get on out of here, and we'll have other shows, including one about interior designing later on today. But right now, let's get on out of here.